Hey, Rising Church, welcome to round three of our session in the book of Psalms. I hope you had a good week so far. I hope you're having a good discussion. I know some of you are itching to get through this because the Super Bowl is coming up here in a couple minutes. But hopefully, you will still have a time to talk about what you learned this week. I do want to give you a quick challenge as we continue going through Psalms. I know we're not even halfway through this series, but I've heard some of you are struggling because Psalms doesn't seem to relate to you, or it just seems like David's whining or complaining, or maybe it's a little bit too emotional, doesn't feel as much meat maybe to discuss as maybe like Luke did or something like that. I just want to encourage you, as you read Psalms, don't rush it. I think again, if we see it as a homework assignment, something that you're supposed to do, then you just read it. And to be honest with you, it's going to take you 30 seconds to read a psalm, and that's not the point. The point is to really wrestle with it. It's to really think about it, meditate on it, which means to not just read it, but to really, read it, reread it, read it again, really, think about what it's saying, maybe even rewrite it in your own words. But the goal is to really let it sink in. Somebody asked me, hey, what about some devotionals that are in the Psalms that would kind of help us understand what's going on? And I kind of think that's not the best way to go, because I want you to actually chew on this thing. A lot of times in devotionals, which aren't bad, but a lot of times we can almost like I think of a bird, feeding its babies, and it chews up the food and it spits it in the baby's mouth. That's kind of what happens with devotionals a lot of times. Is it's somebody else's thoughts, it's somebody else's personality, it's somebody else's filter, and they're taking what God has given us, His Word, and they're filtering it through them and then feeding it to us. And I think it's good for us to wrestle with ourselves, and to really figure out what we think it means, not just what somebody else thinks or even what Aaron thinks, but what do you think? What is God speaking to you? And maybe it would help you to start when you're reading each day to pray and say, God, would you illuminate, would you reveal yourself to me? If this is your word and you revealing yourself to us as an unknowable God, making Himself knowable, then reveal yourself to me, and let me know what it is that you want me to do and how you want to transform me and make me into the person you want me to be. But that's not going to happen if you let somebody else regurgitate it all to you. That's going to take you wrestling with it yourself. And so don't rush it. I'd say really try to spend some time, really, like I keep saying, meditating on the Scripture and figuring out what you think it means and what God is revealing to you through Scripture. Not what He's revealing to anybody else, but what He's revealing to you. So make it personal and let God speak to you. His Word is active and alive. So I just want to encourage you to keep going with that. If you are feeling a little frustrated with, the poetry maybe of Psalms, don't let that be the issue that drives you away. Let it keep going. Keep struggling, keep wrestling. Again, maybe try something new, rewriting your own words, keep using those three questions, but really seek out God each and every day through the Psalms, and I think by the end you will feel like you've been blessed through it. So but this week in our reading, I just want to mention one thing, and that's this idea in Psalms. You've probably caught on to it, but they use the words judge and justice quite a bit, especially in this week's readings. And maybe that's kind of a weird terminology for us because, we're just here in America. I think we take it for granted that we do have justice. We sing it, and justice for all at the end of the Pledge of Allegiance. And justice is just something that we expect. We just think it exists all the time. And you got to put yourself in the shoes of those in Old Testament times when there was not justice. You couldn't go to court. There wasn't lawyers in that sense that would defend you. You were pretty much on your own, and you were, for the most part, unrepresented and had nobody to kind of take up your cause. And so when we read judge and when we read justice, we think God is judge, which is correct, but we think more likely as ourselves being on trial. Like we're the ones up there being prosecuted. And so when we think of judge, we want to be acquitted. The judge is kind of a scary thing in that sense. But when the Jews back in biblical times, when they read it, they didn't have that framework of reference. They didn't think that way. When they thought of judge and justice, they thought, hey, God is the judge and I am the plaintiff, and there's somebody over there who has wronged me, and I want righteous. I want judgment. I want things to be right and correct and justice. I need to receive damages for what's been done to me. And so it's kind of a different view of justice and judgment and all that. And so, again, as Christians, we cry out to God for mercy because we're on the seat being tried. That's our view. Whereas those in biblical times, they more cried out to God for justice. They didn't want mercy necessarily. They wanted justice because they were in the midst of injustice. And so that's why, like, when you see the book of Judges. It's kind of confusing for us because we think, Judge Judy or whatever, Judge Dredd, I don't know. But we think of a judge in a trial, and what the book of Judges is really about, the translation is probably better, is champions. It's somebody who rescues the oppressed. It's a deliverer. It's somebody who's bringing and meting out justice because people are being mistreated. Their land is being stolen. There's nobody to defend them. They're poor. They can't afford, if they do have a justice system, they can't afford to even have their trial go to court because they can't bribe the judge to see them. And so they're just defenseless. They got nobody to represent them. And that's kind of the idea I think you see in some of the Psalms we read this week, including Psalm 82, where he's saying, hey, these judges, or earthly judges, are defending the unjust. They're showing partiality to the wicked because those are the ones that are bribing them or whatever else. But he's saying, hey, God, defend the weak, defend the fatherless, uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed, rescue the weak and the needy, deliver them. And that's kind of the angle I think we need to read in Psalms is I would say probably 95 to 100% of the time when it's talking about judge and justice, it's talking about not that I need to get judged, but would you, God, bring justice because I've been oppressed and I'm not, somebody's stolen my land, somebody's mistreated me, somebody's done whatever, they've gotten away with it, there is no justice. So God, would you be the righteous judge? Would you make things the way they're supposed to be? So that's what they were crying out to God for. So I guess maybe that would help you a little bit as you read in Psalms, as you keep coming across these words, judgment and justice, to maybe think of it that way as more of a civil case than a prosecution, in the sense that we're the ones being judged, but that we want God to be just. We want what's right deep down. So maybe that's just something to think about as you go about this week. That's something that struck me. But what struck you? That's the whole point of this thing, is that you would share with one another what God is teaching you, what God is revealing to himself to you personally. So continue reading in Psalms. Keep going. And I'm just praying that God's going to keep revealing his character to you and that you would draw near to him. So I hope you guys have a great week. Enjoy the Super Bowl, and we'll see you next week.